Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cavell Cloud Conversations podcast. I am joined today by Ben Booth from MaxContact and Barry Tuffs from Chorus CX. Thank you for joining me, Ben and Barry. Why don't you let's do some introductions. Ben, do you want to kick us off with introductions?
Yeah, hi, first off. I'm Ben Booth, CEO of MaxContact. We are a customer engagement platform, predominantly serving the mid-market, applying outbound engagement to industries such as utilities, debt collection, all the way through to charities and public sector.
Brilliant. And Barry, how about yourselves?
Yeah, hi there, and hi Finbarr, hi Ben. Basically, I'm Chief Strategy Officer with Chorus CX. Chorus CX is the go-to-market brand now for a number of different organisations across the company, across the globe, basically, that are coming together. And we're pushing out a CX strategy. My background is in contact centres, UC, going way back, been in the industry for about 35 years. So delighted to be here.
Brilliant. And I mean, from my perspective, obviously, we've got a vendor, we've got a partner on the table. This is exactly the sort of conversation I like to have. I think we get that really good conversation of, what we're building and then how it's actually working in the market. I think we're here today to kind of talk about, as a broad level, contact centers, outbound contact as well. And I know, Ben, you commissioned some voice of the consumer research recently. And I think one of the first interesting things that came out of that was the start of this implication that there's a trust gap between, people running contact centers and consumers. Is that something you'd like to explain a bit for the audience?
Yeah, we're seeing it across our client base and coming from consumers as well. It just emphasises, I think, what most people are seeing. We're seeing that nearly 70% of consumers are actively avoiding calls from a number that they don't know. So it's not withheld. Anything from a mobile to a landline international, they're doing their own call screening. Predominantly around, when we talk to the consumers, it's fear of spam and fraud, too many calls, obviously. But what we're also seeing on the other side is that nearly 80% of people missing calls, it's had an actual impact, negative impact, because they've missed something important. Now, when you've got that, the consumer's also telling us that they prefer to be called for these type of calls. So 81% prefer to be called, of which nearly 70% aren't answering the call. So we've got this real brand problem at the moment and a trust issue. As a consumer myself, and the number of calls I get, which calls should you answer that are important and which ones you shouldn't? I think what we've got to now is that crossover period where people are preferring not to answer the phone they do, and it's actually become a habit. And it's become quite common, and it's becoming a challenge across the sector. So it's really come through in that report.
And I know more anecdotally. I turned off the ringtone on my phone. I have a prescribed list, which is my family, and unless you're on that list, my phone will not ring. And then, speaking to your point, I have missed appointments from the NHS, calls from the HMRC. All of these calls that I really did need to take, but they're not coming through because I got so many spam calls, I think, for about 2 months last year that I just turned it all off.
Well, just to use an example, the police were trying to contact me for a missing person of the week, and I didn't answer the phone.
Yeah.
Because somehow a number with one of our came up, and this is what happens. You just don't answer anymore.
Yeah,
I think part of this though as well is a bit of a UK issue from a regulatory perspective as well. Because what you are seeing now, when you see these spam calls coming in on your mobile, majority of the calls that are coming in are actually mobile telephone numbers that the spam is coming in on. Okay, because Ofcom introduced some regulation that you couldn't use, a geo number if you weren't the owner of that geo number, etc. Now they're just using any old mobile telephone numbers, and that is where the trust problem really starts to come in, because you're just seeing these mobile telephone numbers and you don't know who they are in a lot of cases. So that just proliferates around the whole industry as well.
So I think, but you're describing kind of multiple layers of a challenge there. So is this a technology problem? Is it a cultural problem, and should we just be answering the phone? Or is it a technology problem? Where do we actually come at this from?
I've been doing this a long time, and I think I don't think it's one single thing. I go back from the day when it was everyone was fed up with your RTA and PPI clause, but if actually the regulations were followed, because people are trying, the suggestions I've heard of regulations that are already in place.
Okay.
So it's like, well,
yeah.
So there's an enforcement problem. And actually most companies are trying to do the right thing. You've got the challenge of now the mobile operators or the phone manufacturers can mark you with spam on as little as 5 calls. So take a debt collector. Who wants to be called by a debt collector? But if 5 people on a Samsung device say this is spam, that's now a spam call.
Yeah.
There's who is enforcing these challenges? Is it Samsung and Apple, or is it regulatory for the UK? So there's 2 things. We've ended up in the spiral of, to Barry's point, people are using mobile numbers, but they're using mobile numbers because they're not being given a choice. I can't register my number as a business and say I am registered to this single number, and therefore you can't mark me as spam because that belongs to me. If you could do that, then we wouldn't all be rotating numbers, and therefore there's a trust issue. So I think it's been coming over the last few years, and we've ended up in this point. But I think it's one for businesses to do. But I think also the regulation needs to come in that you can have dedicated numbers that don't get marked as spam, and they're proven to be the endpoint of the business that owns them.
And I've heard the term like branded calling tossed out around there. Is that kind of what you're talking about as well?
Branded calling, it does, but again, I don't think it's fair for businesses have to pay an extra cost per call to brand their calls. Yes, it does help, but again, that's a reaction to the symptom rather than the solution. So branded calls do help, and the study on that voice shows that 80% of people would answer a call if it was branded or they had an SMS beforehand. But you should be questioning, why do we need to do that when, at my company, I own the number and the number never changes. I think we need to look at it from both sides.
And I think, Barry, coming back to you then, I mean, is this coming up a lot in customer conversations? I mean, how is this changing your interactions with your customers? Is this something they're really concerned about, or?
I think they are, okay, when they're looking at how they do outbound campaigns effectively. They have to really start to look at a multi-layered approach, okay? So, if we're calling you Finbarr, then you need to know that it's, Chorus CX calling, and how do we do that? Okay, so that is, okay, maybe I might send you a pre-call SMS to basically say, I'm going to be calling you from this number in 30 minutes, and this is what the possible conversation is going to be about, right? So I'm giving myself more percentage chance of Finbarr answering that call. So starting to introduce different multi-layered approaches and technology to overcome that trust gap. I think that's where we start to advise our customers.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. And a lot of what you're talking about is kind of, getting customer buy-in for the call that they're about to receive, right? So if you can acknowledge that I'm going to call you, you may want this call, we're going to talk about it, then you're more likely to answer the phone. And I think that trust and disclosure of your intentions and all these kind of things kind of leads us nicely into the next thing I wanted to talk about, because if we've got this problem now with spam calling and things like that, and on the horizon we have AI calling, we have synthetic voices, we have the potential of large scale outbound dialing campaigns powered by AI, and I think that's something that a lot of consumers, and thereby proxy the businesses trying to serve them that we would speak to, are probably quite concerned about as well. I guess, Ben, do you maybe want to talk a little bit about that? Are people saying that they're already speaking to AI? Are they saying they think it was AI even when it wasn't? What's actually happening there?
Just touch on that trust issue again. So the consumers are saying, actually, now we've got to the point where most of the time they don't mind dealing with AI, as long as it's signposted and they don't feel like they're being tricked. So consumers quite often think they're dealing with AI and actually aren't, and vice versa. And actually, what they're saying, I think it's nearly 85%, say, actually, we're comfortable with dealing with AI if we're told we are. And if I'm dealing with AI, that's fine. But if I want to be able to get out of that loop and speak to a human, then I should be able to do it. And I think one of the issues we've created is this push to use AI because it's a lower cost to serve. And it is great, don't get me wrong, it does work well. But through the entire study, do you like using AI for these use cases? It was pretty much 50% do, 50% don't. So yes, you can please 50%, but also you're going to annoy the other 50. And what's not been done when designing these AI outbound or inbound programs is thinking about saying, look, you're dealing with AI, and if it's working, most people will use it. That's absolutely fine. But if you're not, how you escalate out and treat it as an escalation to a human rather than a failure of the AI. Because as I've just said, regardless of the outcome, whether the AI works, most of the studies say still 40-50% of the people aren't comfortable using it. So it's not a failure of the AI in itself, it's just an escalation where required. And I think that lack of design and progress has actually created the mistrust on whether you're using it or not, and that's been the failure over and above anything.
So you're kind of... Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, Finbarr, I think that's a really good point there, Ben. The design, because we're consumers as well. So if I sit back and go, how do I want to take an AI call, right? Do I want to be told that I am talking to, whether it's Cora from NatWest or whoever it might be? Do I want to be told that? Absolutely, I do, right? But if I don't want to talk to that AI agent, I want to get out of it. I want to actually then be able to speak to a real human. And I think when we're speaking to customers, that's absolutely the approach, is think about the customer experience. That's what we're talking about here, right? So the customer experience, if you were that customer, what would you want to experience, right? And we have to build that into the design flow, and where people don't build that in, they just go, oh, we'll just call, they won't mind that it's an AI bot, etc. That's where it then causes their trust issues, and it fails.
Yeah, and I think to get this firmly, there's a very big difference between you getting an automated call from an AI that says, this is Barclays AI, I'm calling to verify some transactions because we think there might be fraud. Do you recognise the following transactions? Please say yes or no. You give it no information. There's very low trust on your part. And then, as you say, if you have any problems with this, press 3 and we'll connect you to an agent, right? Suddenly you have a very solid consumer package where I have full control, I have full information. I'm not being asked to trust that it's not. And if I want out of it, I can. I think that's interesting. So we're kind of getting into, I think, an interesting place with this technology, where this is the technology, it works fine. And then here's this bundle of processes where we're learning where it works and it doesn't work. And Ben, I know one other thing that came out of the survey, which I thought was quite interesting, is times when people actually prefer to talk to AI. And I know that from our own research, there was this charity dealing with vulnerable children, and they found that those vulnerable children actually preferred to talk about their issues at first with an AI because there was less exposure to judgment or adults who might take what they're saying the wrong way. But I think you found something similar as well, didn't you, on the finance side?
Yeah, and it's exactly that. So it was where dealing with financial difficulty, they preferred the AI because they didn't feel like they were being judged. And it's important to understand where it does work well and where it doesn't, because dealing with financial general, they prefer to speak to a person. So you do see it where it's much preferred. Again, that was still only 60%, and this is the point, there's still 40% that didn't. But I think in certain use cases, there is a preference. Everything from that all the way through to, we all do use AI now, where the issues can be resolved faster and easier with a lower increment of my time. To your point on the bank one, that actually provides a better service to the consumer. They know you're looking at these things, and I would happily take a call from my bank to say, can you just check these transactions, please? And I think that's the point. It's just, it's the right tool. It's always been the way. The right tool for the right job. Don't assume it applies to every demographic. You use children there as an example. I think you brought up with the technology. It's a lot more custom. But would I call an OAP to go and check, when someone's coming round to the house using AI? Probably not, because they feel vulnerable and afraid of, like, say, scams, etc. So it's definitely the case, and I think it is an interesting time. And it's gone, I think we can all say around this call, it's been adopted much faster than any other technology we've seen. So we're all learning. But what I would say is just make sure you're always looking at your data and adjusting where accordingly, and don't just assume it's a one size fits all.
Yeah, because that was something I wanted to ask you about, Barry, because obviously we've talked a lot about where this can go wrong, but sitting on the partner side of things, you've obviously got to help people navigate actually building and deploying this. I mean, is that a difficult proposition? Are your customers getting burned by this a little bit? Is it going too fast for them? Like, what are you doing to help them on that front?
I think what we try and empower our customers with is we have almost like a crawl, walk, run approach to adoption of AI. Okay, so let's dip our toe in the water. Let's not get too carried away with it. Let's look at how we can implement AI and maybe get some insights in your organization to tell you what's going on truly within your customer experience, not just in the contact center, but across your back office processes as well. And that's what we try and advocate, because we're seeing, who's actually doing AI and a fully blended CX experience really, really well. That's really the top end enterprise organizations. If you look at the SMB or SME space or even mid market, some of those are still implementing omni-channel contact centers, right? And they're not doing that very well at all, because they're not doing that as a joined up approach. So now all of a sudden they're all rushing to AI. It's a complete disparate mess in an awful lot of cases. So that's why we advocate that, right? Don't try and run before you can crawl, right? Let's just do something very, very simple and get you to understand how it can help and implement a better CX strategy across your estate. Okay, so that's what we try and advocate, and try and then build up some really good use cases around that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The omnichannel thing always makes me chuckle a little bit. I mean, we did our own survey of contact center managers across Europe and North America recently, and we said, okay, how many of you still say that omnichannel is a priority? About 90%. How many of you think you're delivering a consistent experience across most of your channels? About 40%. How many of you wish you were but you aren't? Oh, about 50%. All right, okay. So we haven't really captured omnichannel yet as a proper idea, and now we're trying to shove AI in there and hope that it fixes through the cracks.
It's a really, really mishmash of an approach, isn't it?
Yeah, which, I mean, it kind of describes the contact center industry as it has been for a long time. I'm thinking back. So we had our Cavell CX Summit event, at least 3 weeks ago now, I think. Time flies. And Ben, you had a really interesting keynote. I don't necessarily want to explain what it was about, but I think maybe people would like to hear what the main points were from you. I know you had this idea that there were 3 things that most contact centers were missing at the moment, and I thought that'd be something that the audience might find really interesting.
Yeah, so we refer to it as the 3 moments. So we've discussed one. So there's 2 actually now. There's the 2 moments where there's the earning in the brand and earning the connects now. The second was when AI takes over, making sure you design things with the escalation in mind at first, especially with regulation coming as well. And then the third was when it really matters. So when you actually have that human in the loop. So everyone says, AI is the low cost, the easy, high transactional, and actually when it hits the contact center, it should be the high value. But still, even today, and you've been doing this as long as me, that's still, I would say, the statistics are going the wrong way. And actually we're failing the clients more. No matter how much technology seems to come into this space, that challenge always seems to be there. And the 3 areas we looked at, and there's an example that really resonated because it was happening upstairs while I was reading the PowerPoint, was take a retention moment when a client's ringing through retention, and nearly 25% of people, when they're trying to be returned, just feel like they're being sold to and upsold. And it was happening upstairs in a room where my wife was trying to, she'd been told she had to renew her contract, and the one she had wasn't available anymore, and proceeded to just try to double the value of the contract, sell headphones and broadband. And it's like, so you ended up in this experience where when it matters, whether it be retention or financial, there was even one where it wasn't the outcome was negative, it was where customers didn't feel like they'd been heard. And AI is a part of that as well, and that's why the experience doesn't always work. And it's got to the point where I think nearly 60% of consumers avoid contacting businesses expecting a bad experience.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. 60% of consumers avoid, they're your clients, contacting you expecting one of these things to happen. So it tells you that it is in the contact centers. And I think as we introduce AI more and more, I think we've got to use the technology where it's not overly scripted, where agents are being focused to do these things. Because let's be clear, when it's a retention call, the agent's a KPI to upsell, and that's not a wrong thing. But going back to Barry's point and how we've always been in this industry, we always talk about it's about the customer experience. Well, if I don't need a package that's twice the amount, why am I being sold it? And if you do the right things for your customers, then things just win and work. And the technology allows you to look at all the calls and the interactions. If you're pulling more in one place, and you've never had more data and insight to get this right, yet we're still getting it wrong. And I think that is something everyone should still think about, because technology isn't solving this problem. It's ultimately comes down to people, as it always does. Just letting them, do what they think's right. We need to put the judgment back in the people that are at the front of this and the front of the business, rather than trying to force an outcome that isn't always there.
Yeah, I'm reminded actually, as you say that I was speaking to a Spanish contact center manager recently, and he said that in his organization they had deployed a very aggressive form of like agent assistance, which was telling the agents, "Oh, say this, say that, say this," and then the union at their company was like, "This is ridiculous. You've got a room full of experts here who've been doing this job for 4 or 5. They know what to say. They don't need a box popping up every 2 seconds saying, say this, say that." What they did need was a checklist to make sure they'd said the compliance document, collected the detail, all that. And that helped the agent do their job and have a bit of faith that when they finished the call, they'd gotten all the points they needed. But they didn't need someone leaning in and saying, if you don't say this now, you'll be missing out on this KPI, right? So I think it's quite... Again, it comes back to processes rather than technology, right? We have a lot of the technology there, but we're learning how to best deploy.
Yeah. And again, it comes back down to, we've got 3 people on this call. If we were to all receive a card through the door to say, you've all missed your parcel delivery, you need to contact us. What form of media would you take to contact that parcel delivery, right? Would your first port of call be phone them, or would you then go to the website and then look at chat, etc., etc.? Personally, I would. Telephone is my last port of call for that type of environment. I try and go on with the chatbot or whatever and say, here's what I need and everything else. But 9 times out of 10, there's a disconnect there, isn't it? It doesn't deliver what you need, and it always says, "Have I answered your question?" I go, "No." Then where do you go, right? And that's the real problem, right?
Yes, I hope we were able to help you today. And then I'm there frustrated, just hitting the no button for an hour.
And I probably end up calling them anyway.
I think one area that would be quite interesting to explore, and maybe Ben, you want to weigh in on this, is that we're still in a very evolving regulatory landscape for this kind of thing. And I'm sure a lot of customers are sitting there thinking, okay, but, can we do this contextual analysis now? Will we still be able to in 3 or 4 years' time? I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to talk about that in terms of what's happening on that front.
Yeah, I think every company, not just which companies now aren't building an AI policy or AI fair usage within their own businesses. And I think, I quite often say we do need to think about the regulation that is coming, because it is, and the first form will be the simplest, lowest. It'll get added to and added to. And there is a fear about using AI for multiple reasons. There's the regulation on data sovereignty. People are bigger, especially larger enterprises, are worried about are we training our models based on your data, and are they giving up their industry secrets and what they do, and is that getting shared with almost their competitors? It is certainly something that should be at everyone's minds. I would say right now, I don't think anyone should use it as an excuse not to deploy that can add value to the business and the consumer. And it is, is the EU ones, I think August. The UK one usually won't be far behind. How far they're going to go with it, if you couple, especially with GDPR and data processing and PII, if you haven't got these things in place and you're not aware of them, there could be breaches. And as with regulations at the moment, we did our report on the regulations, and they've been out a while now, a lot of regs, and they're going to start biting if you're not keeping on top, and rightly so, because it protects the consumer, and it absolutely should do. So yeah, it's and it feels like a bit of a minefield when you're trying to adopt this technology. You're trying to do things that improve efficiencies in what is a tough world at the moment. We've just come off the back of high inflation, wages, national insurance pay rise, all those things, and pressures coming down to improve operational efficiencies. And then you've got the other side of it, which is normally the case, where regulation and blockers are coming in the other way. Yeah, no, look, there's simple answers. I mean, this is where you come to vendors or partners. They should cut through that for you. We have to do this research, else we don't have businesses, and go to seek out that trusted advisors. But it is definitely something that we're seeing and hearing more and more about. From our point of view, doing sales, it's on every RFP. It's on everyone's mind. They want reassurance. They want to be sure that they're not breaching, but also they want to adopt it to get these benefits in. So yeah, lots going on. I don't think anyone knows where everything's going to land right now. The only thing I would say is we need to make sure we are doing that design with regulation in mind, because the last thing you want to be doing is regulation changes and you're rolling everything back, or you have to pause doing what you used. Because right now, there's certain things in most businesses, if you said, we have to stop doing this tomorrow, most people even wouldn't know where to start. Because the problem with automation is it's automated and people start forgetting about where it is, what it does, and who set it up. So we talk about it daily. It's on our weekly calls: risk, regulation, compliance. Again, lean on business, lean on partners, I would say.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, Barry, I'd love to hear you chime in on this, but certainly from what I've seen, especially from more aggressive markets in Europe like Spain and stuff like that, is this focus on just regulating for good outcomes for your customers, which is sort of where you'd hope that it would end up. And then if you're a customer service operator, you're selling in a solution. If your focus is on delivering a good outcome for your customers, then you'd hope that the government will support that decision when it comes to whatever system you've deployed. Because if it's, what we said earlier, good answering times, ability to escalate, those kind of things are the sort of things that the regulation might end up covering.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that I agree with everything that Ben said. What we're finding is, we're a partner. We're selling. We either sell to another partner, or we're a managed service provider. We sell to a partner, or they sell to a customer. Sometimes we sell to a customer, and we get involved across deployments globally. And depending on the sector that you're also selling into, there's different regulations within those sectors, right? So you go into US and you look at HIPAA, in the healthcare environment and things like that. So we have to be really on top of that, and it is changing, almost daily. And I think the key thing is here, Finbarr, is we try and be as transparent as we can be with the customer. Okay, so if we enter into agreements with the customer or with a partner, then we say this is what we do and this is how we do it. No. So if anything does change, then we have been open and honest about it with any contractual or regulatory framework. So we know we're compliant now. And then if things do change, then, within that contractual framework that we've entered into, then we have been completely open and honest about the way that we do it at the moment. And, the customers entered into that in good faith as well. So, but to your point, I think it becomes really quite critical that we don't get over-regulated in this type of environment. It's what we can all see is that introducing AI to do things like auto QA, right? Awesome across any type CX environment, across an organization. That is just something that every single organization should introduce today, okay? And and we've got the capability of doing that with MaxContact. And that's, as long as the data is protected in the right way, then yeah, don't stifle it with regulation that doesn't help drive an organization forward. That's got to be top of everybody's mind when they start to look at this regulatory environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And you did mention auto QA, and one of the things I did wanted to shift on, I think we're coming closer to the end of the call, is just to talk about, measurements and sort of measuring inputs, outcomes, and then from the customer side of things, like how their demands are changing in this sort of environment. So I know we've talked a lot about how the technology is changing, how consumers are changing, but are you finding that customers are coming to you with new sorts of requests, or saying, well, you're deploying auto QA, I don't want to measure this the way we did before, like I'm going to judge us on this now? Like how is that kind of environment changing, do you think?
You want to answer that one, Ben, or do you want me to go first?
You go first.
Yeah, I, I think it's interesting, okay, because a lot of customers don't know what they don't know. Okay, so when you are putting auto QA in, they're probably going, all right, I might just put it in the contact center. As I mentioned before, you should put it across your whole business, because then that's giving you just real insight to what your complete customer experience is like. But then I would question how many customers actually have the business processes or the business will to actually implement some of the stuff that the AI is telling them as part of that auto QA process. And then when you start to then really start to look at it and go deeper, and you may go, well, I want to introduce some orchestration there, and actually look across all of your estate and look at what's going on in your email world or in your chat world or in this, and make some recommendations. Yeah, then you really open up something where a business really has to embrace that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the other thing we're starting to see different, which I think was expected, by the way, it's not a shock, is we're starting to see more and more organisations that want access to the same data we're using to provide our tools. It is, which is good sign, because it shows that the contact centre, which was always seen as a cost centre, the data in it, people are starting to realise how valuable it is, and how that can feed into probably what got some business intelligence around the business and the workflows out and aside round. So, and I think that's key for all vendors. I do believe that they'll all have to, everyone will have to start opening up the data that they've got. And it's not for protection. If anything, I think it safeguards you, because as businesses allow them to use the data how they want to use it that you've got. So that's becoming more and more common, which is great. I think it's a positive. And other than that, I think what we're finally starting to see is, it sounds daft, but there's the sentiment change of that it will add value. There's a bit of a skill gap with AI, and it's a digital transformation project in a new form, AI adoption, and that we're all only got a few years experience in, even the people who have been doing it from day one.
For sure.
I think the will's there. I think there's a gap between will and intent. I think everyone's got the will and know it can add value. So you need to question, why is the intent low? Why is it still not been adopted end to end? You tend to see use cases. So I've used it for auto QA, I've used it for ID&V, I've used it for rearranging appointments, some simple use cases, but I don't think it's fully embedded in that end to end. I think we're starting to see that now. And I think that's the change where I think with all our day-to-day use with AI, even, I use Claude, and I'm like, well, has that really made a difference to my outputs? And it's like, not really. And where businesses are going to see value is when you bring it into the workflows. And I think that we're starting to see that now.
Yeah, there's this whole idea of a trajectory where we did CX manually, and now we're AI enabled, and then in the future, maybe in sort of 3, 4, 5 years time, we'll be autonomous, and we'll actually be using this data to enable flows. So I guess the topic I really wanted to wrap us up with is, what is this trajectory going to look like? I mean, we've talked about where we are now. I guess maybe chiming into Ben first, sort of like, if a lot of contact centers have just moved from sampling 2 to 5% of their calls, lots of blind moments in their contact center, they move beyond that. Is there, I guess, where do they go next then?
To that, we're starting to see the closing the loop. So now it's 100% sampling, and then you've got your auto QA form. But then what? You've still got to review all the outcomes. We're now starting to see you can build multiple forms for different things. So everything from compliance, your vulnerability, but also competitor analysis and other useful insights you can get from your contact center. But then how do you close the loop? Is that being coached back in automatically, or is someone still having to look at all my call recordings now, interpret, review, and do it themselves? You were seeing, there's auto escalation, there's auto next best action. And I agree with Barry's point. You don't want to tell your skilled staff what to say on every call. What you do want to do is get the information more accessible to them easier. So that's the type of thing that is real value. And we're starting to see now where it closes the next loop. So, because all AI did in the first few years, apart from your automation with your chatbots and your conversational, but in the contact center, was create more data. And bombarded people with more information they had to interpret. But no one was asking, well, what are we doing with it? And I think AI and the workflows are now closing those loops for people, and that's where value is really coming in.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a fascinating subject, though, isn't it? What the direction is going to happen. But again, if you look at it on the consumer side, I'm quite elderly, right? But I'm quite technical. I've created my own little AI bot, right? That I ask it everything, right? And very soon it's now going to be, well, that restaurant you're recommending for me, I'd like you to book it for me, right? So you're going to get AI talking to AI, and how many consumers are going to start to utilize that? Right, and I think that's where it just becomes pretty incredible, right? You're going to get AI talking to AI, and you've got to be prepared for what's coming down the track.
Absolutely, and I think as sort of one of our final comments, Barry, I just thought I'd ask, because obviously you're on here as a MaxContact partner, you've been providing Chorus CX. I was just wondering, is there anything you want to talk about, that joint proposition between the two of you that you'd like to share? What are you doing together that you couldn't do alone?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and we're delighted to be in partnership with MaxContact. Okay, and I think first of all, it's flexibility from the guys at Max for us. Okay, so we have some core elements that we control, and we have our own intellectual property, and other bits that we don't. And it's very important for us that we partner with somebody that fills the gap. So we have a global UC platform. MaxContact do a great CCAS platform, but bringing those together, but putting the orchestration layer across the top and then putting the AI across the top, that's what Ben and the MaxContact team allow us to do, so that it really helps us deliver that crawl, walk, run approach. So I can go to any organization and I can say, I'll be able to give, if you can record your calls across your network, just on the trunk side, I can give you that auto QA, but I can do it on the trunk side, right? So you can have it across all of your organization. Then when they're ready to then perhaps go to a license type model, they don't need to change anything, okay? Because it's still the same platform, okay? We just introduced the license type model, and it's all being driven out of the AI capability that Ben and the team deliver, okay? So it helps us bring everything together under the Chorus platform. So it's a really, really neat partnership.
Brilliant.
So, and on my side, I think the way it's going, and I made it today, is that everyone's been asked to adapt fast. I think where partners come in, and I think this is the sector as well, is people are buying, they don't buy features anymore, they're buying delivery. They're buying, and where Chorus CX and partners come in is they understand their customers really well. They have conversations with them more frequently and more regular than even software vendors do. We try, right? We try to speak to customers regular. So they become that, we've mentioned a few times, they understand the business, they understand the outcomes they want. So clients aren't going, well, I want this feature, that feature, and that feature. People now are talking about, this is the outcome there we need to deliver. How do you deliver that? Well, do they really care? They used to, but it's becoming less and less part of the conversation. So where companies like Chorus come in, they understand the clients, they understand the outcomes, and they can provide the solutions that deliver. Because I keep going back to, I think people now are buying delivery. And promise of delivery over and above how you think you do, because the ecosystem's becoming too big. We're all building features faster than we've ever done before, and it's actually overwhelming to a degree. And I go back, why does clients care? They're going to end up with a technology stack that should deliver, and how it delivers actually becomes less of the challenge because it's getting easier and easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you say, as AI grows more complex, having a partner who actually just understands what you need and then how to put it together is what matters. And then you can compare what they're offering you versus another partner in the RFP. Does it cost the same? Does it say it's going to do? And you can sit there and trust their expertise rather than having to go on that journey alone, which I think is a really good idea. Well, I think this has been a really great podcast. I have a note here just to remind everyone that we've been talking about a lot of data from a Voice of the Consumer report that MaxContact has published. The link to it will be alongside wherever you're watching this, so do go and have a look. There's some great data in there. Otherwise, I mean, just before we wrap up, any sort of key takeaways or final thoughts? What should someone who's listened to this, do differently tomorrow that they didn't do today, or something else like that?
Put us on the spot.
I love asking this question. Think more about your AI strategy. I think that's a very good takeaway from my perspective, at least.
Yeah, I think people are starting to, but I go back to that one statistic that 99% of contact center leaders believe now and in the future AI can deliver more value, but only 41% are delivering more than one single use case. So if that's the case, I think contact centers should lean more on the partners and the vendors to say, right, well, okay, let's put this challenge to you and let's solve it. So think about your strategy. Put the consumer in mind from the report. Don't ignore what consumers are telling us, because it's the same data we get whenever we do these reports. And I've gone back to this before. Is as long as any of us, however you deliver value, as long as that's the outcome we're focusing on, then you're going to win.
Yeah, sensible.
Yeah, I echo some of that actually, Ben. So for me, I always try and put myself in, what's the consumer doing, right? And that's when we talk to customers. It is about customer experience after all, right? For me, it's I think we should make it more accessible. There's so much that's now happening that can really improve a CX experience within an organization for the consumer, that don't just make it the domain of the contact center. What we deliver at Chorus CX is, we can deliver things into every single area of an organization to help measure that CX to start off with, and then determine what needs to happen with it, because that's got to be the starting point. Majority of organizations don't truly understand what's happening within their organizations, what their CX experience actually looks like. And I'll just quantify that. We're coming at it from the mid-market stroke top end SME area. Okay, enterprise organizations, they know what's going on, but I think there's an untapped area within that mid-market SME area where organizations like us can really, really help.
And I definitely think that the people in that area are crying out for help to understand everything that's going on. It's changing so fast. They need someone to step in and be like, no, this is what you're going to do. This is how it's going to benefit you. This is your use cases. Let's get on. Right, so I totally agree. Well, thank you both. I think this has been a really interesting and provocative podcast. As always, if you're still listening to this, that means you really liked it. That means you should tell your friends about it. And let them hear the wise words of Ben and Barry as well. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we will speak to you all very, very soon.
Thank you both.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye.